Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. I am so happy and delighted to welcome you today because I'm sure we're again in for a treat. We've heard both Amy and Will before, but today, as Amy said, she's just an observer, just an observer. I know Wilf has for more than 30 years worked on a lot of different things amongst environment, energy, economic development, and functioned as a consultant. And he's been working all over the world, but mostly I think it was Asia and Africa. And through his work, he's seen a lot of things and been inspired to do something for all individual humans he comes in contact with, and he sees that people has health challenges, and a lot of people have, and that's why today he is going to talk about sustaining our health in an increasingly toxic world. The word is yours, Will, and welcome.
Thank you, Vicky. Let me just see if I can pull up a PowerPoint presentation to share here with you. And if we can do that, then I can promise not to talk so much. Let's see, we've got share here.
Perfect.
Is that giving you the full screen?
No, you have to press on the
Yeah, it's full screen now.
Okay, great. Okay, well, I figured I needed to get people's attention at the beginning here, so I trust this is a slide that will at least capture some interest. If I were to take a quick poll, maybe just for yourself, I know that all of you consider yourselves to be very interested and concerned about health, and I hope that all of you are also concerned about environment. And if not, by the end of this presentation, I hope that you'll perhaps agree with me that environmental health and individual health are really two sides of the same coin. And you can't really be a good environmentalist without being very concerned about what goes on with individual personal health. Nor do I think that we can be really concerned about what's happening with people's individual health if we're not concerned about environmental issues, global issues, if you will. But as they say, think globally, but act locally. So yes, it's true. There's been recent research again about how or even our beloved dark chocolate candy is increasingly contaminated with some heavy metals. But what I'd like to do is give sort of a broad overview of all of this. And I should be quick to point out that if you were to think about the term toxic environment today and look it up online, I'm sure that you would probably find three major groups of entries. The first would be hopefully this one of toxic environment and a pollution and poison sense in the world that surrounds us. The second might be related to electronic emissions, EMFs, and other things which are also becoming highly of concern as environmental pollution. I'm not going to try to address that today because it's a bit separate and it's a long topic. But I'd be happy to come back to it again maybe in a few months. And then finally, I think that if you look up toxic environment today, you'd probably see quite a bit about politics and maybe internet and social media. And I think that that's also a very important aspect of toxic environment. But let's focus on the pollution of toxic substances, which has been around since much longer than humanity. And at the point that I'd really like to make at the start and maybe reiterate towards the end as we go into discussion is that from an environmental perspective, which is where I've spent my career, our concerns are about pollution and what a term which is not very often used, but depollution. And the terms toxins and detox are probably much more often used in relationship to health, but they're really interchangeable, both for health and for environmental things, and certainly from a sort of a conventional environmental professional's viewpoint, the key points about dealing with pollution are, first of all, you want to avoid it. And if you can't avoid it completely, you want to prevent it. If you can't prevent it, you want to contain it. If you can't contain it, you want to dilute it, because as we say, have long said, dilution is a good solution to pollution. If you can't do that, you want to mitigate. You have to take steps to try to correct the situation, or ameliorate the impacts of it. And then finally, in traditional environmental things, we also talk about detoxification, and especially in recent years, more about regeneration. And I think that as you can probably imagine, these terms cut across directly into health as well. And that's why I say that these are really two sides of the same problem that we face in the modern world. I think one of the things to remember about all of this is that toxins, environmental toxins, and toxins for people have a long-standing natural background, as well as being manufactured. In other words, made by man, human created, if you will. So from the very beginning, people had to figure out which plants or animals could poison them. Which mushroom should you not eat? Which plant should you eat or not eat without cooking or proper preparation? And then sort of moving beyond that, once people began to figure out that they could ferment some foods and turn it into other interesting chemicals, say that might cause hallucinations or other mental impacts, or perhaps have a positive impact, or hopefully on someone's health, or perhaps even have a negative impact on the health of people that you don't like. These are the natural things that have been around for forever. Everything from, in my book, from poison ivy to snake venom to drugs of all kinds, as they've evolved over the centuries. And then almost immediately, once you had people living in more than small family groups and moving around a lot, you began to run into problems of sanitation, if you will, in a very broad sense today, urbanization. But even if you've ever been on a camping trip or someplace where you've stayed out in the woods for more than a couple of days with a couple of friends, you know that sanitation becomes a real issue. And people have had to deal with this forever, and it's been the undoing, certainly of many small groups of people, and probably some very significant urban areas for many centuries. And these are the problems that overcoming these problems in various ways has been a part of the secret to the advance of civilization and all the science and technological developments that have come since. Conflicts and war have also been incredibly important from the very beginning on this. In fact, the English word toxic apparently comes from some old French Latin derivatives, which basically relate back to a bow and arrow, or particularly the bow. And the thinking is that because poisoned arrows began to be used, maybe with toxic of various kinds, in conflicts between people, and eventually in warfare on a much grander scale, with, say, the introduction of mustard gas in the First World War, that toxics, the word itself really is another result of conflicts and warfare between people. Kind of interesting to think about. Then along came man's, if you will, use of fire. which is quite essential for cooking and for heating in places. And in fact, today, wood and other biomass are still used by better than 1 out of 4 people around the planet, for cooking and for keeping warm in the winter. And as Amy and I were talking yesterday, we were just recently in Zambia, and we got to visit several homes of some fairly poor villagers, basically enclosed spaces of, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet if you're lucky, enclosed by mostly bricks and maybe with a small window. And, in the summertime, people can cook outside where there, at least there's open air. You get the smoke and so on from your wood, and that causes problems. But in the wintertime, or when it's cold or raining, people move it indoors, and that's where, to this day, why tuberculosis and other respiratory diseases are so prevalent in many poor communities around the world, and particularly for women and for small children, because they're the ones who spend most of their doors in time cooking. And since it's been long a professional interest of mine and relates to other aspects of environment, let me just mention about charcoal. Charcoal is a preferred fuel in anywhere compared to wood, basically, because although it takes some effort to gather it and then to turn it into charcoal, it's done in sort of informal or very formal commercial kilns. And once you've produced it, it's much cleaner, it's much lighter, and it produces better flames for cooking or for keeping warm than does firewood. So if you're one of the 4 out of 10 families around the world today who's still relying on wood or other biomass that you've had to go out and spend a couple of hours collecting, if you can afford it, you'll move up to charcoal, and that's great for you and your family. But in fact, the process of making charcoal is generally done by using half a dozen, even a dozen times more wood to produce the charcoal commercially and to sell it back to people who can afford to use it than the wood that you would use directly. So it's been a major cause of deforestation in Zambia and across Africa and much of Asia and Latin America. Anyways, we all moved on to coal when we could, and coal was great in many ways, except of course mining has all kinds of complications. And by the 1950s, London, for example, early, I guess 1952, went through a period of, within 1 week, having more than 4,000 deaths due to air pollution, which was clearly just smog from the burning of coal. And then you get into oil and modern industry and mining and what I would call industrial chemistry, which really took off in the 1940s, and during the second and after the Second World War. And I think that it's this modern chemical industry, which is where most of the problems that we focus on for this topic really have come about. Because I guess the quick way to say it is that biologically, the human body has been dealing with all kinds of natural chemicals for millennia. We've worked out either that we can survive them, or we can ameliorate them, or we can put them to good use. But once we started with modern chemistry and producing all kinds of chemicals, then the body began to be confronted with new chemicals that perhaps it could deal with, perhaps it couldn't, and maybe most dangerously, perhaps were very similar in shape and form to other chemicals which our body would normally use, but in fact would sort of interfere or block up the biological process within the cells that happens, and it really takes many generations of evolutionary adaptation to be able to deal with those in a natural way. And instead, what we've had to do is develop regulatory systems, the FDA for anything related to food and drug types of things. And then with the creation of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency in 1970, gradually moved on to include toxic chemicals. That legislation came in 1976. And it's sort of a similar arrangement where the regulatory agencies, in order to appear to be being fair, have had to rely upon various ways to gather knowledge and testing. And that process is intended to be somewhat equitable, but instead has, I think Dr. Gary would agree with me, created a vast industry of creating information and knowledge, which perhaps can be reviewed by committees and maybe even hold up in court, but may have very little to do with common sense or wisdom in terms of what gets approved and utilized. And instead it's driven by market forces. And again, that leads directly to the petrochemical industry. So I just briefly on modern healthcare and medicine, I think this group is certainly familiar with some of the complications of modern medicine, some of the contradictions, the fact that antibiotics have been credited properly with saving probably millions of lives, but antibiotics are things which are anti-biology, anti-life. The other word for them would be a biocide, literally. So again, from an environmental or from a health perspective, these things can be a real concern. And they also, everything, so many of our modern medications, the approved pharmaceuticals are, say, antihistamines or anti-inflammatory or indicative of the fact that they are trying to shut down a process of life within the cells. So then you add to that from the middle part of the last century, the addition of chemical fertilizers, which has rapidly become the basis of most of the agricultural production in the world, and all the chemical complications that come with producing and utilizing those fertilizers, and then pesticides. And pesticides, I might just point out, I think has been sort of a watershed event. Again, pesticides means that you're killing pests. And of course, in nature, distinguishing between, say, pests and humans is not really what it's not the way that nature and chemistry deal with things. Anything which can be harmful to a pest might well be of concern for human consumption. And I think that most people who've been involved in environmental things would credit the publication of the book Silent Spring in 1962 as being sort of the watershed event that has raised environmental consciousness that really kicked off the environmental movement of the 1960s. And just as a brief word of personal connection, my grandparents gave me a copy of the big, thick hardcover Silent Spring book for Christmas when I was probably in 5th grade. And I won't say I read it cover to cover, but I certainly understood what Rachel Carson, the author, who was a marine biologist by training, and why she had become so concerned that the vast use of pesticides, particularly of DDT at that time, could well lead to literally a silent spring where there would be no bird life or insect life for people to enjoy and benefit from. So just to put this all into our present world, it's gotten a lot more complicated since the 1960s and 70s. Again, EPA was created in 1970. The FDA goes back to the 1920s, 1930s. But it's very clear that there are increasingly opportunities for acute incidents, for whether it's an overturned trailer truck or train that spills out toxic chemicals into a community, or an industrial accident, or just cumulative exposure from low levels of all kinds of chemicals and things which are to some extent or another problems for human cells to deal with. And we've become, I think probably most people on this call and are probably have been thinking about and trying to do things to assure that their own usage and exposure to such chemicals within the home or within their workplace and community, that we take our own steps to do that. But even whatever steps we take on our own as consumers and or workers, we can't avoid what's happening to the soils, and particularly to the oceans and to the atmosphere, where now you have literally the very long distance transfer of everything from microplastics to atmospheric airborne small particulates, tiny dust and chemicals that come across all the way across the Atlantic during part of the year, all the way across the continental North America with air pollution from forest fires and other exchanges of gases, and in the oceans in natural processes. So we're quite surrounded. There's no escaping it. The question is, what can we do to protect ourselves and our families, and that's really where I want to get to in this conversation. I think the starting point for all of this again is education and good personal health practices. And again, on this call with you guys, we know where to begin. It's our own personal health, that of our family and friends, and very simply, the more we can do to protect and enhance our personal health, the better, not just for us, but for the environment. So let me just put in a word or two. I want to get on to the discussion, but I often hear people complain that, well, I would buy organic produce from the store, or organically grass-fed meat, or pasture-raised chicken eggs, but they're 10, 15, 20, maybe even 30% more expensive than conventionally grown food products. Well, I would just invite you to consider that it's an investment on your part. It's not just an investment in your own family's health, but insofar as the regulatory systems may not be perfect and so on, but the more that we spend on organically grown goods, and that applies to clothing materials and other household things, the more we spend on organic and, if you will, environmentally friendly products and less processed products, the more that the marketplace will adjust and try to change the production system. And that's a part of what has to happen in eventually. So the faster we all help to accelerate that, I don't think any of us on an individual or group basis can overcome the economic system, but every vote of our dollars and then every vote of our politically is a vote that's going to affect this. So let's see, we need to, okay, again, if you're concerned about the environment and things on a national or global basis, it's basically the same kinds of things. You want to start with your own health, the health of your family, protecting that in various ways through your purchases and practices. And I would just add to that, the more that we can connect with nature itself, the more that we can get outdoors and appreciate the parks and recreation areas and sort of drive up the demand for that, but more the opportunity for our family and friends to reconnect with natural things. The better it is for our health, the better it is for the environment. And if you want to leverage beyond your own immediate purchases or votes, then by all means, there are community organizations, and we can multiply our impact certainly by joining with others and by directly contacting those at the local, state, and even national level to express our interest and concerns. We can talk more about that a little bit, if you will. These are just a couple of the key groups that I would recommend to anybody who's interested either in learning more about environmentally friendly and therefore better health products. The Environmental Working Group, I think, has done a wonderful job over the years, and I know many of you are already familiar with that for their Dirty Dozen and Clean 15 lists that they produce on and update on an annual basis, as well as a lot of other good informational material. I think, again, the Organic Consumers Association may not be a perfect organization, but it is probably an important lobbying and thinking group. And when you consider a few years ago, there was estimated to be 15 professionally paid lobbyists of the pharmaceutical industry for every single congressman and senator in Washington, D.C. We really need groups like the Organic Consumers Association. And I would argue also there's a group called Citizens for Health, which has been around for a while. It's not quite so well known, but we know the people here in Washington who started it and who still run it. And I think they have their leverage is quite out of proportion to their size, and they're a good one to support as well. And I'm sure that you probably have others I'd be interested in hearing about. And I guess I'd really like to open up the rest of this to discussion about what you have found to be helpful or in protecting your health and that of your family, or what you might be most concerned about.
Thank you very, very much, Will. That was really, really interesting, really enlightening, and really, I loved it. And the first thing that kind of sprung into my head is we all need to know it takes a good health to get sick. Because if you are not well, then you're not gonna get better if you get sick. So if the foundation is not okay, if you've been if you've had some toxins come into your body and you get sick, then it's going to take a long time before you get back to good health. And I wonder if some of the discussions maybe could be, what kind of sicknesses can we actually get if we come in contact with pollution?
Well,
just raise a hand, and I'll take you in turns. Sorry, Will.
No, let me just start off by saying a lot of the disease, the degenerative diseases and the diseases that we associate with aging or with everything from autism really up to Alzheimer's. I would say that all of the degenerative diseases have research which at least tends to link them to exposure to toxins. And I guess one of the ones which I kind of find most interesting and alarming to think about is, I just rechecked the figures this morning, since from 1950 to the year 2000, the general measurement of the viability or quantity of viable sperm in human males dropped by about 1% from 1950 to 2000. From 2000 to 2020, it's dropped by literally 50%. And that's true particularly in North America, Europe, and Australia, but it's happening worldwide.
That's scary.
Well, I'll be a little bit less dancing around the subject here. Cancer, cardiovascular disease, stroke, degenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, everything it's been closely correlated with toxins in the environment.
And if you are harmed there, then your gut is going to be harmed as well. And if your gut gets sick also, then you are in a bad place. Judy?
There aren't any particular diseases, generally speaking, that people are going to get from various pesticides, except for the fact that if you're going to take in all of these toxins and pesticides and herbicides and who knows sides that you can get these days, you're going to not have an immune system, and your immune system is what's going to keep you healthy, i.e. your gut, etc., because most of our immune system is in our gut. And if we don't take care of ourselves the best way we can, and I know it's darned expensive to go to the store, but I am a big proponent of the EWG.org and the Clean 15 and Dirty Dozen. Because you can't always find, something that's organic that you want, but you may not need it. It might be on the Clean 15. One of the big things that I eat a lot of are avocados, because they're just really good for you, but you don't need to buy them organic, which is really nice to know. So that's my 2 cents.
And not to forget the children, because, if the parents have been exposed to toxins and the woman gets pregnant, if there's sperm count enough, then you might actually have learning disabilities, you might have psychological malfunctions, I don't know what it is, and mental dysfunctions as well. Brent? If you're talking, Brent, you're muted.
Hello. Okay. Thank you. Oh, that was a fabulous information. I'm going to listen to the recording so I can get all that information. And one of the big things that stuck out to me was the smoke inside the homes for all those billions of people. And, that would hurt the lungs, and that would make them easier to get infections and tuberculosis. So that was really interesting. All of it was really, informative. And the toxins, I've heard that we deal more in a day than our great grandparents dealt with their whole lives as far as toxin exposure. And I just emailed you, Gary, a chart that came up. And this is the rates of, and these are toxins. Maybe you can post that, show that on the screen. I don't know how to do that, but anyway, I just emailed it. And that just starts in 83 when it was, we had 10 vaccines. And now they have 74 vaccines. When I was young in the 50s, they only had 5. And the autism rates were 1 in 30,000 back then instead of 1 in 10,000 in 83. So, all of these toxins, besides that, we still are all subject to. And that's why it's so wonderful that we've been led to things like SIA, which redox, it'll crank up our glutathione levels, which are major, and detox and protector. And then zeolite, which is micronized and cleaned so that we can even clean it out of, the toxins out of the blood. And they found from the clinical study on that that they also came out, glyphosate came out after using that. So we have access to incredible things, but we have to choose wisely. And I agree with organic. It's worth paying the price. You know, we got to speak with our dollars if we want to change the people.
So if we don't want to spend time on our well-being, we are going to be forced to spend time for our sicknesses.
Yeah.
And Will, did I hear you say something about did you say something about organic clothing or something?
Sure.
Mhm.
One of the I think everyone has heard of microplastics and the
Mhm.
fact that so much of the plastics and synthetic materials are being broken down into very tiny pieces. This is Dr. Gary's area, but those microplastics are not just coming from plastic bags and bottles. You know, the creation of nylon and rayon was just the beginning, and some of the materials that are being used in popular clothing today. And I think I guess I'm always a little particularly concerned about some of these cloths and so on that are claimed to have what is it, nanofibers and so on. Anything which is that small and synthetically derived is going to persist in the environment and get into everything from mother's milk to the fat of penguins in the Arctic, and that's what's been happening. So if you can, by all means, anything you can do to stay with natural materials, cotton or wool, and especially again organically grown cotton, because cotton as a crop would use fairly heavy pesticides and fertilizers. Just to take two easy examples.
Wow.
Gracia just wrote in the chat, the gut and brain connection is key. Everyone's liver is overwhelmed. We live in a toxic soup. Health is, I think it's meant to be holistic.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the interesting parts of this as an environmentalist is that I think one area where science has begun to shed some light is the microbiome, and the fact that we've begun to realize that human beings are not just individuals who are separate from other living things as well as the rest of the environment, but that indeed we have more of a microflora, microfauna inside of us than we do, if you will, living cells of our own. So in a real sense, we ourselves are entire ecosystems. And that's why these biocides or antibiotics and other persistent chemicals are of such concern, because it's not just us, but it's, when we say us, we need to now include our microbiome as well as, if you will, our 60 or 70 trillion human cells.
And I can see a lot of new faces here, so please let me just have the opportunity also to inform you that we are actually doing courses in this. Dr. Gary Samuelson is the one leading the course, and it's really, really worth the time and worth the money if you want to help yourself, help your family and your children and your friends and whoever you meet, because you're going to get so smart. And there's a lot of good things. How do I clean my vegetables to make sure that there are no toxins in them? How do I drink proper? How do I eat proper? What do I eat? A lot of things. And it's I really recommend you to take a closer look and join us for one of our courses. I'm not sure when we are starting, but stay tuned. You just come here on Thursdays and we'll let you know whenever we have a date. Sorry, Will.
No, let me just reinforce the commercial. I mean, this is, again, on my list, better personal health, is the start of environmental salvation, and better personal health. No better place to start than cellular health coaching.
Yeah, education process is key. I'm leading a live CHC, which is cellular health coaching course, on September the 16th. It'll be a 12-week program with a professional coach to help you or anybody that wishes to obtain their optimal health and the education they need. Education is a really key element, I think, in everything, and it's the key actually to changing the world. we need to be educated. Thanks, Will.
I think you're being very modest, I must say, because I know for a fact that that course has been life-changing for some of our students. And I see some of you sitting here, and I can just say, I don't know where a lot of us would have been if we hadn't joined the cellular health coaching, because it is truly life-changing. Brent, did you raise a hand?
Yes. And
Good.
to that, and the course just started that education, and then the continuing education for those that take advantage of it and tapped into these weekly community discussions are getting vast knowledge. And like Gary said, that is what's going to change the world. Knowledge is power when put to use constructively. And that's what we want to do. Is that you're saved no faster than you gain knowledge. And you just got to apply it, and you got to go out after it. Too many people are just stuck on that one rung in the ladder. You just got to keep climbing and hungering and thirsting after knowledge, in all areas, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And I love that comment about the fabrics too. And I just last week, somebody sent me something about linen and wool, and talked about it in the biblical, and why today they know the frequencies of fabrics affect us, and when we wear them. And they were talking about not to mix wool and linen, because individually, when you wear them linen in like the summer when it's hot, the frequency is wonderful for your body. And in winter, the wool by itself is wonderful for your body. And they both have incredible properties, but when you wear them together, they kind of cancel their frequencies out. And that was very interesting to me. I sent that around to a few people that might be interested. And I'm sure other fabrics are the same way. So those of you that might be gifted with muscle testing, you can do that. You can put on some piece of clothing and muscle test and see, what it does for you. And I'm thinking about doing that, because I practiced that because some of my clients were really good at it. And, it's a real deal. And you have the ability to ask and you shall receive in anything. So you're just asking yourself. You just have to. And one thing I learned when you do that muscle testing, every day when you're going to do it, you close your eyes and say, ask yourself, and which is my yes, and whether you kind of lean forward or lean back, and that will kind of tell you. And when you put a fabric on it, is this good for me? And you just stand there and you'll lean forward or backward, and then you know the answer. It's kind of an amazing thing. It's like anything, exercise. The more you practice it, the better you get at it, and the stronger you get at it. So anyway, I like that fabric thing idea.
How do you muscle test on your own, Brent?
That's what I was just telling you. On your own, you just stand there by yourself in a quiet place, and then say, what is my yes? And you just stand there, and you kind of feel yourself either lean backward or forward. Okay. And then you ask yourself about something. Put some sugar in your hand and say, is this good for me? And if your yes was forward, you're going to go backward. you know, and those kind of things. And you practice with little simple things, things you know are absolutely not good for you, you know, test that way. And then put something in your hand that is absolutely, you know, is good for you. And then test that way. And at first, you know, you kind of questioning yourself, but if you just clean your mind out and just meditate, you can get to where you can do this, and it'll tell you. We have the ability in ourselves to find these answers. It's a spiritual thing where you tapping into the light, the frequency of light for your answers.
Janica was also mentioned that you can do a self pull to see how much force it takes to pull your fingers apart when you loop them like this. And that, I think that's another method that people use.
I've tried that, and that if that works for you and you get good at it, great. But I know that tipping forward and backward is what's worked best for me.
Yannicka, could you please take a piece of white paper and show your pendula so people can see it? Because you can also use a pendula if you want, but be sure it's negative. Or no, it's not negative or positive. It has to be, how do you say, zero?
Neutral.
Yeah. Neutral. Thank you, Brent.
I've never seen that before, but that might be very interesting, especially if it was some kind of a crystal that was neutral. Huh. That's interesting. I've never seen that.
When I use the crystals, I wash them in water and I put them in the sun for cleaning, and then I always bring, this is just dental floss, and you know, I bring them to the food store, and you know, this is my favorite when I'm doing vitamins and things, how much today or not today, or but this is like
is that lapis lazuli?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
That's one of my
but I think it's very important that we just keep our mind open, because you can use a lot of things to test yourself and figure out what works for you, and then use that.
Yeah, can I emphasize something along these lines? There are a lot of different ways, and we learn. And I think that Will pointed out a very important connection. We are connected with our environment on a cellular level, in every level. We are connected, and there are trillions of signals taking place between us, between our environment, everything that is around us. It makes us aware of everything that is around us, you know, even the light that's coming into our eyes, the sound that's coming into our ears, the smells, the everything. We are adapted to test our environment, whether it's good or bad, for our health. And almost intuitively, even without being able to reason it through, our body knows what's good for us. I've said before in my CHC course, you know, if you drink a glass of water and you kind of go, it's your body saying, "Oh, that may not have been the best glass of water." If you drink a nice crystalline water from a natural source and you drink it, it goes, there you go. Your body's telling you this is good stuff. And it's the same thing. We went across the street and we bought some organic honey, you know, and we put it on a little dab on our cereal and a little dab on, you know, on a buttered bread, and that was good stuff. And so you can really tell almost, and all this biofeedback stuff, the muscle testing and everything, I think is based on our own bodies evaluating, you know, what is good and what's bad, and we kind of know. So anyway, I don't know how we know, but we have so much more sensory information than we even realize about what's happening around us.
But I think it's funny that Will just mentions the environment, because I live on a secluded little island where we have a natural habitat for a lot of different things, of animals mostly. And if I go to the mainland and I go through the industrial area, I can actually feel how it's like you can't breathe, and the air changes, and the oxygenation is different for the body. I don't know how to explain it, but yeah. Melanie?
I was wondering, like, you say, like, avoid having your food in plastic containers. Is that because I know, there's some plastic that's not supposed to transfer, like to carry water in or something like that. I forget what it's called. But are you saying because of the making of it is bad for the environment, or because it's actually doing something to the food and the water? I know it can do that.
Yeah, there's both a problem that it can actually change the nature of the food a little bit, and particularly if you think about people who feed baby formula or to their infants, that is, well, probably an artificial formula to begin with, but they're putting into probably a plastic baby bottle, and then they're putting it into the microwave oven to warm it up. I mean, that's just wrong on every level. But in general, what we've seen is that foods are not only processed much more, but everything to make them more convenient is done. And for those of us in modern consumer societies, that generally means not just plastic bags or plastic bottles, but increasingly these little plastic containers, which you kind of rip open, and it's wonderfully convenient, and hopefully it helps to keep things fresher and cleaner longer. But every time we're pulling off those little strips along the side, I get worried because the materials are. I mean, again, this is Dr. Gary's field, but these materials are fragile as well as very, very strong, and they do everything we do every time. If you're cutting on a plastic cutting board, I mean, you're loosening up all these little particles, and so it's not just the bags that get degraded by people walking on them or out in the sunshine. It's everything that we're doing with them in the kitchen. If we, the solution or an ideal solution from an environmental perspective, from a health perspective, of course, is that we all have our wonderful little background gardens, which have all the fresh fruits and vegetables in season and an adequate supply and so on. But for all the reasons that it's not going to happen that way. But the more we can encourage that to happen, the more we can encourage people to either grow their own, or for small family farms to be able to grow something that can be delivered or picked up conveniently on a local basis, the better it is for those of us who can directly benefit by it. And then beyond that, again, it's voting with our dollars at the supermarket or the big box store or whatever. Anyways, I hope that helps a little bit. I would just say you can't avoid it, but you can minimize, and by all means, any kind of liquid or you want to, if you can't transfer it into a glass bottle, use some of the high-end plastics. And I would just put in a footnote for those of us who deal regularly with a redox signaling supplement, that the plastic that is used is quite stable, and probably about as good as you can get for a commercial product. And in most places, in the US at least, it will probably be recycled fairly easily because it is a relatively recyclable plastic. But also in most places where it could be recycled, it may not be happening because the recyclers do not like what they would call a mixed plastic product. And while the bottle itself that we use is stable and good for the product, the wrapper around it, the blue and white wrapper around it, may well keep it from getting recycled. So each day or whenever I finish a bottle, I always take a knife or scissors and carefully slip off the plastic wrapper before I put it in the recycling box. I encourage you to do that also.
Just
Then
as information, I would like to show you something. If you are using, I don't know if you can see, if you're using your bottles, on top there's a little triangle with a number in it. All the ASEA bottles has a number 2. The Association of Plastic has made it so that the plastic you have to be able to identify which kind of plastic you are buying. So all plastic bottles has an ID number, so you can see what is used, if it's okay to reuse, or if you have to not even drink what's in the bottle because it's so full of toxins in the plastic. So if it's been in the heat, in the sun, then you are drinking the toxins, like, you think you're doing something good and you're really not. Sorry.
Yeah, that was one of the first questions I asked Gary 10 years ago, was what kind of plastic it was. It was BPA free, and he says it was the best plastic, the container we could find. Glass would be ideal because then it doesn't degrade at all, but because of shipping and danger and stuff, but the plastic was the best they could find. And the other thing you said about communication between our environment and animals, we know that our redox will affects and makes the animals healthier and the plants grow better. And so the redox signaling, there's communication there, and perhaps between us and in our environment. So that's another thing that struck me.
Yeah,
The time is also almost done, so I'm just saying to all of you that if you have to leave, thank you for have joined us today, and please join us next Thursday. We will go on as there is still a few questions. Gary?
Oh, no. Well, just really quickly on the bottle, the science. Plastics are made out of polymers, which are chains of organic material. And scientists have even trained bacteria or genetically modified bacteria to make these polymers. They can spin nylon, for example. Really bad idea. If they ever got out in the environment, they would destroy us. But anyway, the polymers, if they are tightly bound and such, and the curing materials and such are out of it, like high density polyethylene. High density polyethylene is a very tightly bound polymer. Then it doesn't chafe off, but if they're loosely bound polymers, and these little polymers, they can get out into the environment. And as Will has said, they're a deep concern, a deep concern that they can be very damaging, can very difficult to get rid of too. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Melanie?
Okay.
Yeah, there was one more thing.
Sorry, did you have more, Gary?
No, that's it. We're gonna wrap up pretty soon here, though.
Okay, Melanie?
I just also wanted to say before that my boyfriend's sister and her girlfriend went to Alaska and visited a mink farm, and the people raising mink said that there's so much birth control from women from their urine in the water, that the minks cannot
Breed, yeah.
Yeah.
And we're finding that many oceanic species their populations are collapsing also, or at least they're not reproducing. And still research at an early stage, and quite simply, as you can imagine, it's hard to monitor all of these things, to get good data, particularly on living systems which are in remote environments, and you don't have necessarily a baseline at all. and you're trying to figure out what changes, if any, and what those changes might be caused by, what they mean. And so again, we could talk about science completely some other day, but I think there's a lot to be said for caution, for common sense, and applying, if you will, age-old wisdom, as there is for obtaining detailed scientific data, which is often just used for debating and arguing. Anyways,
Thank you so much, Will.
yeah,
And thank
Vicky,
you so much. Yeah.
yeah, just again, I would just like to reiterate that I hope that everybody will continue enjoying dark chocolate. I hope that you will all continue to pursue your good health, and that you will appreciate that everything that you're doing for your health positively is good for the environment, and hopefully everything that we can do for the environment will be good for our collective and individial health.
And
Thanks.
it's
That was
important
the
to read.
important thing. What is in chocolate? What?
Read ingredients. Read ingredients.
All right.
Thank
Well,
you very much.
are we ready to wrap up now a little bit?
Yeah, the dark chocolate's really good for your cardiovascular and cleaning out the arteries.
Yeah.
If it's 70% or greater.
Yep.
Only
Be
problem
sure
with
to have
chocolate.
be sure to have some water on side, because 70% you're going to get dry in your mouth.
The only bad thing about chocolate is the stuff they put in it,
Mm.
like the sugars and the oils and the and
Okay.
stuff. You get the good stuff.
The
So-
shorter the list, the better.
People, thank you so much for being here today. And I'm sure that the topic next Thursday, you are not able to live if you don't hear that. So come back. And if you have some friends you want to join us, please feel free to do that. I'm looking forward to seeing you next Thursday. And as always, Dr. Gary is going to say goodbye to us.
Goodbye and thank you. Thank you, Will. I've been extremely inspired and uplifted today.
Yeah.
We have a
Very
lot of
good.
a lot of hope for our people and our environment, our world, as this kind of information makes it out into the general public. It's true. It is based on everything that we're able to observe and know, and the thing that we are indeed part of our world and have been since the beginning of time, part of our environment, part of everything. We cannot disconnect ourselves from that. And I love what you said at the very beginning, that even the idea of toxicity in our own bodies as well as in our environment causes the same type of damage, same type of problem, and same type of logistics in order to get the toxicity out. And I pray that we might be able to find these solutions, and we might find them quickly, and that we will educate people. We have our good communities like these that'll help educate people all around us to find those great solutions. Thank you, everybody, and we'll talk to you next Thursday then.
Love y'all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. So come back
Bye,
soon, Will.
everyone. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, same to you.
Thanks. Take care. Thanks.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Will. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. It's wonderful.